Hey guys, today I'm going to talk about leprosy. In this video, I'll be talking about microbiology, history, transmission, risk factor, pathogenesis, classification, clinical spectrum of leprosy, and how to differentiate these clinical features from one another and rare variants of leprosy. If you're visiting my channel for the first time, my name is Dr. Namra Aziz, resident dermatology. I make a lot of educational content. If you haven't subscribed my channel, please click the subscribe button and the bell icon to get notifications. You can also follow me on Instagram at Dr. Namra Aziz. First of all, we all should know what is leprosy. Leprosy is an infectious disease caused by acid-fast bacilli of Mycobacterium leprae complex, which includes Mycobacterium leprae and Mycobacterium lepromatosis. Leprosy has been around since at least 2000 years, but even after all this time, we still don't know how it's transmitted. For long, leprosy was considered an inherited disease because of the slow spread of the disease and clustering of cases in the families. It was considered as a punishment of God, and families were considered as an outcast. It was in 1873 Gerhard Armer Hansen discovered that leprosy is not an inherited disease, but it is caused by Mycobacterium leprae. Even after that, the stigma attached to leprosy still exists. How do people get leprosy or Hansen's disease? Contrary to the popular folklore, leprosy is not highly contagious. The means of transmission of leprosy is not fully understood. The possibility of the transmission of leprosy through the respiratory route is gaining increasing attention in the recent years. For long, it has been said that leprosy is acquired by contact with infected person. But what exactly is a contact? All that we know at present is that the individuals who are in close association or proximity with leprosy patients have a greater chance of acquiring the disease. The definition of the contact, such as skin to skin, intimate, repeated, and has made it appear as if the disease could only be acquired under such condition, and that the transmission of the leprosy involves some kind of rubbing of the organism onto the skin from an infected person. Certainly, there is no proof that the transmission takes place only through such contact. In general, closeness of the contact is related to the dose of the infective agents inoculated, which in turn is related to the occurrence of the disease. There are three commonly discussed means of transmission of leprosy: respiratory tract, skin, and infection acquired from armadillos. Now let's discuss respiratory tract as a mode of transmission. Discharge from an untreated patients with multibacillary leprosy frequently contains large number of bacilli. Mycobacterium leprae is inhaled and multiplies on the inferior turbinate of the host. Once the upper respiratory tract of the new host is infected, widespread dissemination within the host may occur. Now let's discuss skin as a portal of entry and exit of the organism. The skin is unimportant in the transmission of leprosy. It is true that the lepromatous cases show large number of the organism deep down in the dermis. However, whether they reach the skin surface in sufficient number is doubtful. Occasionally, the organism may enter through the broken skin. In the southern United States, some armadillos are naturally infected with the bacteria that causes Hansen's disease in people. And it may be possible that they can spread it to people, but the risk is very low, and contact like handling, killing, or eating of these animals is required for this transmission. In summary, although no firm conclusions can be reached with regard to the transmission of Mycobacterium leprae, entry through the respiratory route appears most probable, although other routes, particularly broken skin, cannot be ruled out. Possibility of discharge of Mycobacterium leprae from the nasal mucosa raises the question of survival of the discharged organism outside the human host. It has been reported that Mycobacterium leprae from the nasal secretion can survive up to 9 days in tropical condition. Such survival of organisms suggests the possibility of the contaminated clothing and other fomites acting as a source of infection. It is important to understand this, that prolonged close contact with someone with untreated leprosy over many months is needed to catch the disease. You cannot get leprosy from a casual contact with a person who has Hansen's disease. Activities like shaking hands or hugging, sitting next to each other on a bus, sitting together at a meal cannot transmit leprosy. An important question is, can a pregnant woman pass leprosy to the unborn child? Hansen's disease is also not transmitted from a mother to her unborn baby during pregnancy, and it is also not spread through the sexual contact. Can leprosy be spread by insect bite? There is no evidence that biting arthropods transmit leprosy. It is surprising that in contrast to tuberculosis, there are few documented cases of leprosy occurring in both the medical and non-medical attendance of leprosy patients. Rarely, tattooing or other penetrating injuries to the skin can be the root of the infection. Important concept to grab is that it has been demonstrated that Mycobacterium leprae can be shed in large numbers from the mouth and nose of the patient with untreated lepromatous leprosy, and to a lesser extent from the skin as well. But it is unclear if the patients with other forms of leprosy can spread the bacterium, and household contact of other forms of leprosy also develop the disease. Household contacts represent 28% of new Hansen's disease patients. There is an 8 to 10 times greater risk of acquiring disease if the household contact has lepromatous leprosy versus only 2 to 4 times if the contact has tuberculoid leprosy. Now let's talk about some of the risk factors for developing leprosy. First would be close contact. Now this makes sense. If you have close contact with someone who is in an untreated case of leprosy, you get exposed to their nasal secretions and you can get infected with leprosy. Second is your age. It's interesting that leprosy has bimodal effect, which means there are a couple of groups that have the high prevalence of disease. These include ages between 5 and 13 years and older than 30 years of age people. Third is genetics. So what has been shown is that variance in the NOD2 gene, which is involved in the innate immunity, is linked with increased risk of leprosy. Polymorphism of other genes such as vitamin D receptor gene, TNF-alpha, and interleukin-10 has also shown a role in different clinical manifestations of the disease. Fourth is immunosuppression. This makes sense because we know when we are immunocompromised, we are at increased risk of contracting diseases, including leprosy. Although poor nutritional status was thought to predispose to leprosy, no good evidence substantiates this. Improved socio-economic conditions, extended schooling, and good housing reduce the risk of leprosy. BCG vaccination protects against leprosy. Who gets leprosy? Leprosy is known to occur at all ages, ranging from infancy to very old age. The youngest case so far documented was in an infant who was 2.5 months old, where the diagnosis of leprosy was confirmed by histopathology. Generally, age distribution has a bimodal effect, which I have explained earlier. Although leprosy affects both sexes, in most parts of the world, males are affected more frequently than females, often in a ratio of 2:1. It should be pointed out that the male preponderance in leprosy is not universal, and there are several areas, particularly in Africa, where there is equal occurrence of leprosy in the two sexes, occasionally even a higher incidence among females. Incubation period of leprosy is variable. An average incubation time of 2 to 5 years has been calculated for tuberculoid cases and 8 to 12 years for lepromatous cases. Mycobacterium leprae is a very small, slightly curved rod that is characteristically acid-fast. It is an obligate intracellular organism. It cannot be cultured in an artificial media. Mycobacterium leprae multiplies very slowly. Generation time is approximately 12.5 days. It is an obligate intracellular organism. It cannot be cultured in an artificial media. The organism may be cultivated in mouse footpaths and most effectively in armadillos, whose lower body temperature is more optimal for the growth of Mycobacterium leprae. Mycobacterium leprae grows best at 27 to 33 degrees centigrade, correlating with its predilection to affect the cooler areas of the body such as eyes, upper respiratory tract mucosa, testes, small muscles and bones of hands, feet and face, as well as peripheral nerves and skin. Now, what happens when Mycobacterium leprae enters inside the host body? Mycobacterium leprae is inhaled and multiplies on the inferior turbinate. It has a brief bacteremic phase before binding to the Schwann cells and macrophages. What does this mean? This means that after multiplying on the inferior turbinate of the nose, the Mycobacterium leprae goes into the blood and then attacks the Schwann cells. It multiplies inside the Schwann cells, causing demyelination of the nerves. Later, macrophages and lymphocytes arrive at the site of the bacterial invasion and try to limit the infection. Macrophages play an important role in the body's attempt to eliminate Mycobacterium leprae, producing interleukin 1, TNF alpha, and interleukin 12 when they encounter this organism, and are successful in the majority of the patient, as the most common disease outcome among the host is spontaneous cure. Macrophages also present the antigen to the Th cells. Upon this antigen presentation, a Th response is generated depending upon the cell-mediated immunity of the host. Up to 95% of the patients exposed to Mycobacterium leprae will not develop the disease, suggesting that host immunity plays an important role in the disease progression and control. It's not known why these people would not develop disease. Whether it's a genetic resistance or they develop a subclinical disease is not known. And at which level the Mycobacterium leprae will be controlled is not known. Which means whether the disease is controlled at the level of the nose, at the level of the Schwann cells, at the level of the macrophages is not known. Even among the remaining 5% of the patient, the most common clinical outcome is spontaneous resolution. Patients will develop indeterminate leprosy and will eventually lead to spontaneous cure. Remaining will develop a tuberculoid leprosy or lepromatous leprosy depending upon the host's cell-mediated immunity. If cell-mediated immunity is good, the patient will develop a Th1 response against the Mycobacterium leprae, resulting in the tuberculoid leprosy. Cytokines like interferon gamma and interleukin 2 play an important role in the tuberculoid leprosy. However, if the cell-mediated immunity is poor, the patient will develop a Th2 response, resulting in lepromatous leprosy. Cytokines like interleukin 4, interleukin 5, and interleukin 10 play an important role in lepromatous leprosy. Like I said before, patients can develop subclinical disease. Then an important question would be, is there a reliable test to determine whether a person has encountered Mycobacterium leprae and mounted a protective immune response? The answer is there is no reliable test for determining that. However, this sensitization to Mycobacterium leprae can be checked in certain individuals by certain tests. These are antibody levels against the phenolic glycolipids. Phenolic glycolipids are the lipid complexes in the cell wall of Mycobacterium leprae. These antibodies can be tested by ELISA, in vitro lymphocyte transformation test, and skin test responses to soluble Mycobacterium leprae antigen, which is also called as lepramine test. But none of these tests are completely reliable. Now let's talk about classification of leprosy. According to WHO, leprosy is classified as paucibacillary and multibacillary forms. A paucibacillary case is defined as a case of leprosy with 1 to 5 skin lesion without demonstrated presence of bacilli on a slit skin smear. A multibacillary case is defined as a case of leprosy with more than 5 lesions, or a case with the nerve involvement only, which is all called as pure neuritic leprosy, or a case with any number of skin lesions and neuritis, or with the demonstrated presence of bacilli on a slit skin smear irrespective of number of skin lesions. It's important to understand here that presence of either one of the following: skin lesion greater than 5, involvement of any nerve, or the presence of the bacilli. Irrespective of the number of the skin lesion, the patient will be diagnosed as a case of multibacillary leprosy. This classification is very important for the treatment of leprosy and should not be confused with other classification system. Treatment of the leprosy is based solely on this classification. Hence, it's very important to understand this classification. A case of paucibacillary leprosy is treated with a separate regime compared to the person with the multibacillary leprosy. Leprosy has a wide clinical spectrum, for which we have another classification system called as Ridley-Joplin classification, representing the clinical spectrum of the disease. This classification was developed for research purposes and is still used in clinical practice in many parts of the world. This classification has tuberculoid pole at one end and lepromatous pole at the other end. Starting from the tuberculoid pole to the lepromatous pole, we are moving from the less severe form of the leprosy where there is good cell-mediated immunity to the more severe form of leprosy. We are also moving from the less infectious or non-infectious disease to the severe and more infectious disease. The humoral immunity increases from the tuberculoid pole to the lepromatous pole, but it's of no use because we know that Mycobacterium leprae is an obligate intracellular pathogen and humoral immunity has no role in killing the number of bacilli also increase from the tuberculoid pole to the lepromatous pole. The spectrum of the Hansen disease has two stable poles, the tuberculoid form and the lepromatous form. These so-called polar forms do not change. The patient remains in one or the other form throughout the course of the disease. The polar tuberculoid form, the type with a high cell-mediated immunity, is characterized by less than 5 number of lesions and very few organisms. The patient has strong cell-mediated immunity against the organism. The natural history of many tuberculoid leprosy cases is for spontaneous cure over several years. The polar lepromatous form has very limited cell-mediated immunity against the organism. Lesions are numerous and contain many organisms. Between these two poles is every possible degree of infection, forming the borderline spectrum. Cases near the tuberculoid pole are called as borderline tuberculoid. Those near the lepromatous pole are called as borderline lepromatous, and those in the middle are called as borderline. Borderline Hansen's disease is characteristically unstable, and with time cases move from the tuberculoid to the lepromatous pole, a process called as downgrading. Usually the onset of Hansen's disease is insidious. Prodromal symptoms are generally so slight that the disease is not recognized until the appearance of the cutaneous eruption. Actually, the first clinical manifestation in 90% of the patient is numbness, and years may elapse before the skin lesions or other signs are identified. The earliest sensory changes are loss of senses of temperature and light touch, most often in the hands and feet. The inability to discriminate hot from the cold may be lost before the pinprick sensibility. Such dissociation of sensibility is especially suspicious. The distribution of these neural signs and their intensity will depend upon the type of the disease that is evolving. Often the first lesion noted is a solitary, poorly defined hypopigmented macule that merges into the surrounding normal skin. Less often, erythematous macule may be present. This form of the leprosy is called as indeterminate leprosy. I'll discuss a detailed account of it in a while. Now, what will happen with these patients? Few cases will remain in this state. Some will evolve into lepromatous, tuberculoid, or borderline types, and some can even resolve spontaneously depending upon the cell-mediated immunity, and never develop signs and symptoms of Hansen's disease. Alternatively, the patient may present with skin lesions which have features of established form of the disease. Patients frequently present with the sign of nerve damage, weakness or anesthesia due to a peripheral nerve lesion, a blister, burn or ulcer in an anesthetic hand or foot. Borderline patient may present in reaction with nerve pain, sudden palsy, multiple new skin lesion, pain in the eye or systemic febrile illness. All of these will happen when a patient will be in reaction. I will explain these features when I'll talk about the reactions in leprosy. Now let's talk about indeterminate leprosy. The earliest clinical presentation in leprosy often is in the form of an ill-defined hypopigmented macule or patch, situated on the lateral outer aspect of the thigh, face, and extensor aspects of the limb. The color, however, may vary within the same individual or between the individuals depending on the skin type. In fair-skinned patients, the lesions may be erythematous, and in dark-skinned patients, they may be slightly coppery brown. The body hair appear normal on these lesions, but the macule may be slightly dry as compared to the surrounding skin. This initial clinical presentation is known as indeterminate leprosy and is observed as a first sign of disease in context in about 20 to 80% of the patient, often in the examination of the family context of an index case. However, it is generally believed that the cell-mediated immune response against Mycobacterium leprae is not well developed in this early presentation. Sensory loss is unusual in indeterminate leprosy. However, patients commonly present with a loss of thermal sensation, that is an inability to differentiate between hot and cold water in a test tube. The slit skin smear is usually negative. The common differentials for the lesions of indeterminate leprosy are P. alba, a hypochromic variant of P. versicolor, early vitiligo, post-inflammatory hypopigmentation, and a hypopigmented variant of polymorphic light eruption. The absolute confirmation of the diagnosis of indeterminate leprosy is the demonstration of acid-fast bacilli in phyte-stained sections in a biopsy. Perineurovascular infiltration is also highly suggestive. The histamine test is very useful in the diagnosis of indeterminate leprosy in fair-skinned individuals. In histamine test, histamine is injected into the skin, and the response of the skin in the form of erythema, wheal, and flare is seen. This response depends upon the integrity of sympathetic system. In patients with leprosy, the integrity of sympathetic system is compromised as nerves are infected. So we will not see erythema, wheal, and flare, which is called as triple response. This can give us a clue that the patient has indeterminate leprosy. But is the biopsy really necessary? Because 3 out of 4 indeterminate cases of leprosy heal on their own. The rest become determinate and enter the clinical spectrum of leprosy. However, when the clinical suspicion is doubtful and the histology is inconclusive, the patient should be kept under close supervision. There should be no hurry to label the patient as a case of leprosy, as the disease is often associated with severe social stigma. Moving on to tuberculoid leprosy. Tuberculoid leprosy forms one end of the spectrum in Ridley-Joplin classification. The cell-mediated immunity is high in the patients with tuberculoid leprosy, and Lepramin test is reactive. Due to high cell-mediated immunity, lesions may heal on their own in the majority of the patients. The symptoms in tuberculoid leprosy might be cutaneous or neural or both. Tuberculoid lesions are solitary or few in number, usually less than 5, and are asymmetrically distributed. Lesions may be hypopigmented or erythematous and are usually dry, scaly, and hairless. The typical lesion of lepromatous leprosy is large erythematous plaque with a sharply defined and elevated border that slopes down to a flattened atrophic center. The border of the skin lesion are elevated, and this represents the preferred site for histological examination. Like I said before that the lesions can be macular, hypopigmented, or erythematous, here they will resemble clinically indeterminate leprosy lesions. Then how we will differentiate them from indeterminate leprosy? The presence of palpable induration and neurological findings distinguish tuberculoid lesions from indeterminate lesion. The most common location are the face, limbs, or trunk. Scalp, axilla, groin, and perineum are not involved considering the higher temperature in these areas. A tuberculoid lesion is anesthetic or hypoanesthetic and anhydrotic, and superficial peripheral nerves serving to the lesion are enlarged, tender, or both. If the examiner runs a finger around the lesion just beyond the outer edge, a thickened sensory nerve may be palpated. Like I said before, tuberculoid leprosy can be purely neural, with pain and swelling of the affected nerve followed by anesthesia or muscle weakness and wasting. Alternatively, a skin lesion appears with or without the evidence of the nerve involvement. The greater auricular nerve and superficial peroneal nerve may be visibly enlarged. Nerve involvement is early and prominent in tuberculoid leprosy, leading to the characteristic changes in the muscle groups served. The nerve involvement is usually patchy, unilateral, and asymmetrical. The neural symptoms can present as pain, sensory loss, tingling, muscle weakness, or paralysis. First, the temperature sensitivity is lost, followed by pain, and finally the loss of tactile sensation. There may be atrophy of interosseous muscles of hand with wasting of thenar and hypothenar eminences, contractures of the fingers, paralysis of the facial muscle, foot drop. Facial nerve damage dramatically increases the risk for the ocular involvement and vision loss. The evolution of the lesion is generally slow. Even in tuberculoid leprosy, there is often spontaneous remission of lesions in about 3 years. A remission may result sooner with treatment. Spontaneous involution may leave pigmentary disturbances. Borderline leprosy, as its name implies, has features that are intermediate between the two ends of the spectrum. The severity of the cutaneous and peripheral nerve abnormalities depends upon whether the patient is leaning towards tuberculoid pole or lepromatous pole. Lesions in borderline tuberculoid leprosy often resemble those of tuberculoid leprosy, but they are more numerous, usually greater in number than 5 and less than 10. The lesions are also less well defined as compared to tuberculoid leprosy. Unlike tuberculoid leprosy, where the outer margin is well defined, lesions in the borderline tuberculoid leprosy have an outer margin that at places slopes towards the normal skin. Borderline tuberculoid lesions are characterized by finger-like lesions called as pseudopodia. There may be satellite lesions surrounding the plaque. Satellite lesions are characteristic of borderline tuberculoid leprosy. The lesions are often dry, scaly, hypoastatic plaques with a loss of appendages and decreased sweating. However, these features are not as prominent as those seen in tuberculoid leprosy. It should be noted that the lesions can be macules as well. In the maculoanesthetic presentation of borderline tuberculoid leprosy, there are pale macules with decreased sensation, mostly on the face, lateral aspect of the extremities, buttocks, and scapula. These are large, asymmetrical, hypopigmented lesions with well-defined edges and a dry surface with decreased sweating. There are two types of nerve involvement that can occur in leprosy. One is the nerve involvement of the lesion, which can lead to hypoanesthetic and dry lesion. The other is the nerve involvement of the peripheral nerves. Both of them are different. Talking about peripheral nerve involvement, the nerves are asymmetrically and irregularly thickened in borderline tuberculoid leprosy. The patient may present with anesthesia and motor deficits. The nerves are severely involved in episodes of the reaction in borderline tuberculoid leprosy. During a reaction episode, the nerve function may deteriorate rapidly and the patients may present for the first time because of the nerve function impairment. In the absence of prompt treatment, this reaction might lead to paralysis followed by deformity and disability. Phyte staining for AFB is often positive and bacterial index ranges between 0 to 2+ in the skin smears. This also serves as a differentiating point because the bacterial index is usually 0 in the patients with tuberculoid leprosy. So clinically, the difference between borderline tuberculoid leprosy and tuberculoid leprosy is the greater number of lesions and less well-defined lesions. In addition to that, there are finger-like projections called as pseudopodia, which can give a clue, and satellite lesions. I haven't mentioned type 1 reaction as a differentiating point, and I'll talk about that in detail when I'll talk about leprosy reaction. Moving on to borderline leprosy. This is the most immunologically unstable portion of the borderline spectrum. Patients quickly move either towards the lepromatous or the tuberculoid pole. Dimorphous lesion, that is the lesion characteristic of both tuberculoid and lepromatous types, are seen in this part of spectrum. Skin lesions, which are in the form of infiltrated papules, plaques, or even nodules at times, tend to be symmetrical. The characteristic lesions of borderline leprosy is annular plaques with well-demarcated, punched-out inner margin and a sloping outer margin, giving rise to a Swiss cheese appearance.
Talking about peripheral nerve involvement, the nerve involvement is variable in the patient with borderline leprosy. If it is downgrading from borderline tuberculoid leprosy, there may be asymmetrical nerve thickening, and if upgrading from borderline lepromatous leprosy, the nerve thickening may be more symmetrical. Nerve involvement may be severe in the case of the type 1 reaction, like in the borderline tuberculoid leprosy. On histopathology, the Pfeiffer stain for AFP is positive. On microscopy, bacterial index on slit skin smear usually ranges between 2 positive to 4 positive. So the differentiating point of borderline leprosy from borderline tuberculoid leprosy is the characteristic lesion of borderline leprosy, which are the annular plaque, which, like I have already mentioned, have a well demarcated inner margin and a sloping outer margin. In addition to that, the lesions in borderline leprosy are symmetrical compared to borderline tuberculoid leprosy, where the lesions are asymmetrical. Bacterial index is also higher compared to what we seen in borderline tuberculoid leprosy. It's between 2 positive and 4 positive. Presence of dimorphous lesions, which means that the lesions which have characteristic of both tuberculoid and lepromatous types can also serve as a differentiating point. Talking about borderline lepromatous leprosy. Lesions in borderline lepromatous leprosy are multiple, and there is an increased tendency for symmetry. Lesions often begin as hypopigmented to coppery-hued macules that are multiple in number, more symmetrical in distribution, and smaller in size that have indistinct border that merge into the surrounding normal skin. A decrease in the appendages and sweating, which are features of diseases in the borderline tuberculoid and tuberculoid spectrums, are not prominently seen in borderline lepromatous leprosy. With time, the macules undergo induration infiltration, beginning from the center and forming plaques and nodules. Often the lesion in borderline lepromatous leprosy have downgraded from the higher spectrum, which is evident due to the presence of the variable morphology of the lesions, which may also have a larger size. In borderline lepromatous leprosy, the peripheral nerve trunks are thickened and tend to be symmetrical. The nerve damage is not as severe as that is seen in borderline tuberculoid leprosy, and the corresponding anesthesia and paresis is usually not seen in the early stages of the disease. Symmetrical anesthesia involving the hand and feet is seen in the later stages in the course of the disease. Severe nerve deficits can occur in the case of reactional episodes. Patient may manifest with type 1 reaction after starting the treatment. Type 2 reactions or erythema nodosum leprosum affect 10% of the patients with borderline leprosy. The lepramine reaction is almost negative. Pfeiffer stain for AFB is strongly positive, and bacterial index can reach up to 6 plus with globi. The clinical feature of borderline lepromatous leprosy are very different from borderline tuberculoid, borderline and tuberculoid leprosy. But clinically it resembles lepromatous leprosy. The differentiating point of borderline lepromatous leprosy from lepromatous leprosy are following. If the patient has downgraded from the higher spectrum of lesion, then the clinical morphology of the lesion and history can serve as a differentiating point. However, if the patient directly present as a case of borderline lepromatous leprosy, then it could be difficult to differentiate from lepromatous leprosy. The differentiating point at this point would be type 1 reactions, and the patients with borderline lepromatous leprosy do not show the features of full-blown lepromatous leprosy, such as madarosis, keratitis, nasal ulceration, and leonine facies. If the patients develop type 1 reaction during the course of the disease, then it's borderline lepromatous leprosy, because the patients with the lepromatous leprosy do not develop type 1 reactions. Now let's talk about lepromatous leprosy. The cell-mediated immunity is severely impaired in lepromatous leprosy. This impairment results in the uncontrolled multiplication and dissemination of lepra bacilli. Lepromatous leprosy can appear de novo due to the highly energetic state of the individual, or may downgrade from the borderline tuberculoid or borderline lepromatous spectrum in the absence of the treatment. Lepromatous leprosy with a de novo appearance is called as polar lepromatous leprosy, and when a result of downgrading, it is called as subpolar lepromatous leprosy. It's important to differentiate the two because the subpolar group can regain its lost cell-mediated immunity and upgrade in the spectrum. Phyte stain reveals large number of acid-fast bacilli and globi. Also, the patients with subpolar group clear earlier bacteriologically than the polar group after the therapy. The cutaneous lesions of lepromatous leprosy are multiple with bilateral symmetrical distribution over the arms, legs, buttocks, face, and trunk. Warm areas of the body such as axilla, groin, perineum, and hairy scalp of the body are relatively spared as lepra bacilli favor the cooler areas of the body. Often these areas of the body have been described as immune zones in leprosy. But the sparing of these areas has nothing to do with the immunity and simply occurs due to the temperature preference of lepra bacilli. The clinical features of lepromatous leprosy can generally be divided into early macular and late infiltrated stages. Early macular stage. During the initial phase of presentation, lesions are often in the form of many macules. In the light colored individuals, the macules are slightly erythematous, and in darker individuals, the macules may be hypopigmented to mildly erythematous with a coppery hue. These macules are indistinct and coalesce with one another. They have indistinct borders and merge inconspicuously in the surrounding skin. There is little difference in the texture between these macules and the surrounding normal skin. However, they have a shiny appearance and exhibit the impairment of sweating. There is no loss of sensation and the skin appendages are almost normal. Macules seen in borderline tuberculoid lesion, on the other hand, are anesthetic, have a dry texture, and exhibit the absence of appendages and lack of sweating. Tuberculoid macules are large and few in number, whereas the lepromatous macules are small and numerous. Moving on to infiltrated stage. In due course, if left untreated, the macular lesions progress to develop induration. Due to minimal infiltration and a shiny appearance, the lesions are often better visualized in oblique lighting. The minimal infiltration of these lesions is better appreciated by pinching the lesions rather than by simple inspection or palpation of the lesions. The infiltration is more marked on the face and ear lobules. The infiltration of the ear lobules is better seen by standing behind the patient. Moving on to late nodular plaque stage. If left untreated, the infiltration increases and macules progress to form papules, nodules, and even plaques. Even with increasing infiltration, the characteristics of the lesions remain essentially the same. That is, they have an ill-defined outer border that merges into the surrounding skin. The nodules make their first appearance on the ear lobes, and the disease spreads everywhere from that. They are commonly seen over the buttocks and extremities, especially over the elbows, fingers, joints, and genitalia. These nodules and occasionally the areas of thick induration may break down to produce ulcers, especially during the episode of type 2 reaction. These repeated episodes of ulceration and healing, when involve the ear cartilage, lead to what has been described as rat-bitten appearance of the ear. These ulcers are rich in lepra bacilli and the patient is highly infectious. The ulcers are more commonly found in the nose, mouth, and throat due to the breaking down of mucous membrane. Involvement of nose results in the nasal stuffiness, crusting, and epistaxis. A history of epistaxis is often an early pointer for lepromatous leprosy, but has to be specifically sought in the patient's history. The involvement of the upper respiratory tract is seen in about 80% of the patients. Progressive induration, thickening, and nodulation of the face accentuates the skin folds, producing classic leonine facies. The nodules are initially movable over the underlying subcutaneous tissue, but later they become fixed. An untreated patient presents with leonine facies, thickening and nodulation of earlobes, and a broad swollen nose, which may be collapsed. Thinning of the eyebrows, which is called as superciliary madarosis, and eyelashes, which is called as ciliary madarosis, and may have characteristic facies leprosa. Facies leprosa is characterized by resorption of the nasal bone, interior nasal spine, supraincisive alveolar region, and interior alveolar process of the maxilla, with associated sensory or motor damage depending on the type of the nerves involved. Early in the lepromatous leprosy, there may be no nerve thickening. In contrast to borderline tuberculoid or tuberculoid types where nerve thickening is predominant even early in the course of the disease. If the patients are diagnosed and treated early, there may be no residual nerve thickening, but the same may not be true for nerve deficit, and it may persist. The peripheral nerves are first to be affected, and they may become firm, hard, and eventually fibrotic at the sites of predilection. That is where the nerves are closer to the surface. For example, at the ulnar groove, radial groove, neck of the fibula, and radial styloid. The well-known glove and stocking anesthesia is a late manifestation of lepromatous leprosy. With time, the anesthesia becomes extensive, and there is almost complete anhidrosis of the limbs. The dry skin appears ichthyotic, which may be further worsened by clofazimine administered as a part of multi-drug therapy. Before the development of frank anesthesia, the digests may appear fusiform and are hypersensitive to even minor stimuli or trauma. The patient often experiences severe neuralgic pain even at the slightest touch. This sensitivity is followed by frank anesthesia, which is bilaterally symmetrical, although it may develop earlier in one limb than the other. The anesthesia may be patchy at first. Testing for anesthesia should be performed for pain, temperature, and light touch using a pin, hot and cold water, and wisp of the cotton respectively. Sensory examination of leprosy patients should be done for all the three components, as there might be loss of only one aspect, which is called as dissociated anesthesia. Thermal sensation is the first to be affected, followed by touch and then pain. This outcome is of grave consequence because the patient, now unable to perceive the sensation, has repeated traumatic ulcerations that are slow to heal. This insensitivity leads to chronic non-healing ulcers and resorption of fingers and toes. Also, trophic ulcers develop at the pressure-bearing sites. There might be secondary infections of these ulcers, which may further lead to cellulitis or osteomyelitis. Damage to motor neuron leads to muscle weakness, wasting, and paralysis. The damage also results in classic deformities such as claw hand deformity due to the involvement of median and ulnar nerve, ape thumb deformity due to the involvement of median nerve, wrist drop due to the involvement of radial nerve, foot drop due to the involvement of lateral popliteal nerve, and facial palsy due to the involvement of facial nerve. As a result of hematogenous dissemination of lepromatous leprosy, it can affect several organ systems apart from the skin, including the eyes, bones, oral cavities, testes, reticuloendothelial system, muscles, and bone. They can be affected directly by lepromatous leprosy or secondarily in reaction episodes. Testicular atrophy leads to sterility and impotence. The prognosis of lepromatous leprosy in the absence of treatment is poor. The disease progressively worsens and affects the entire body. The patient is left with many non-healing ulcers and several deformities. Even with the institution of the treatment, remission is often punctuated by several episodes of type 2 reaction. Death from leprosy is mainly due to the superadded infections, severe and recurrent type 2 reactions, amyloidosis, and renal failure. Now let's talk about eye involvement in the leprosy. Infiltration of corneal nerve causes anesthesia, which predisposes to injury, infection, and blindness. Leprous deposits in the eye cause keratitis, iridocyclitis, and iris atrophy. Leg ophthalmos or inability to close the eye results from the paresis of orbicularis oculi due to the infiltration of the zygomatic and temporal branches of the facial nerve. Facial lesions cause a tenfold increase in the risk of the facial nerve damage. In lepromatous disease, leg ophthalmos occurs later and is usually bilateral. Bacillary invasion of the iris and ciliary body makes them extremely susceptible to reaction. Blindness due to leprosy is a devastating complication, especially for a patient with anesthetic hand and feet. Importance of performing radiographs in leprosy. Well, there is no clinical utility in performing radiographs in leprosy. However, there are certain changes on radiographs which are seen. Radiographs show osteoporosis in the phalanges, small osteolytic lesions, and often hairline or compression fractures. The fingers may become crooked or short. Nails are thin and brittle. Moving on to some rare variants of leprosy. Histoid leprosy. Histoid leprosy was first described by Wade in 1960. The term was coined after the classic histopathological appearance of histoid lesions, which have histiocytes that form interlacing bands and whorls. Histoid leprosy was initially reported to manifest after the failure of long-term dapsone monotherapy, irregular therapy or inadequate therapy. However, it is now well known that histoid leprosy can develop de novo as well. Histoid leprosy is considered by some to be a subtype of lepromatous leprosy, whereas others considered it to be an independent type. This is characterized by very high lesional bacillary load but with a relative absence of globi. The cell-mediated immunity and humoral immunity are probably higher than those found in lepromatous leprosy. Clinically, the lesions appear firm, erythematous, shiny, smooth, hemispheric, round to oval, non-tender nodules on the background of the normal skin. These lesions are located on the face, back, buttocks and extremities, as well as over the bony prominence. When localized on the face, they have characteristic centrofacial distribution. Occasionally, the lesion may appear pedunculated or ulcerated. The nodules may be superficially or deeply placed on the skin or in the subcutaneous tissue. Lesions may manifest as plaques that are well defined and scaly, especially around the pressure points such as elbows. Rare presentation include presentation like xanthomatous lesion, umbilicated nodules resembling molluscum contagiosum, and scrotal sinus. Reaction episodes are considered to be uncommon in histoid leprosy, however, episodes of erythema nodosum leprosum have been described. The differential diagnosis of these lesions include progressive nodular histiocytosis, conventional leprosy nodules, molluscum contagiosum, and neurofibromas. The histoid lesions show a high bacillary index and have a typical histopathological appearance. This form of leprosy has been associated with Mycobacterium leprae and a newly described organism in the Mycobacterium leprae complex, Mycobacterium lepromatosis. Lucioleprosy is characterized by diffuse infiltration of the skin, which in the initial period might go unnoticed. There is diffuse infiltration of the face and hands that may mimic myxedema-like appearance, often giving the impression of a moon face or healthy look, and imaginatively called as lepra bonita, beautiful leprosy. This form of lepromatous leprosy is characterized by diffuse lepromatous infiltration of the skin. Localized lepromas do not form. A unique complication of this type of leprosy is reactional state referred to as Lucio's phenomena, which is also called as erythema necroticans. The skin of the extremities may appear edematous and is smooth and devoid of hair, and may have violaceous erythema, especially on the hands and feet. As the disease progresses, the infiltration persists, but the skin becomes thinner and atrophic, and consequently the patient appears to have prematurely aged. The lower limbs appear xerotic and have ichthyosiform changes. The earlobes become saggy and stretched, and the face and trunk may often have telangiectasias with a rosacea-like appearance. Hair loss is observed and involves the eyebrow, eyelashes, and body hair. Nasal mucosa is involved insidiously with an initial congestive phase in which the mucosa is swollen with numerous telangiectasias. This phase is followed by the formation of sanguineous crust, and in an advanced stage, the symptoms are similar to those observed in lepromatous leprosy with nasal obstruction and epistaxis, followed finally by the ulceration of septum and leading to a deformed saddle nose appearance. The involvement of larynx is rare and may present with dysphonia and rarely a respiratory obstruction. Due to panuritis, there is generalized hypoesthesia and hypohidrosis. In advanced stages, there may be systemic involvement with the infiltration of liver and spleen leading to hepatosplenomegaly. Ocular involvement can occur and often there is madarosis with exaggerated shining of the eyes known as children's eye. A peculiar phenomena that characterizes Lucios's leprosy is the Lucios phenomena. It is often the onset of Lucios phenomena that unmasks Lucio leprosy. Lucio phenomena is similar to type 2 lepra reaction and is characterized by well-defined angular JAG purpuric lesions evolving into ulceration and spreading in an ascending fashion and healing with atrophic white scarring. Lucios phenomena is a reactional stage characterized by thrombotic phenomena in addition to necrotizing cutaneous small vessel vasculitis.
That's all for today. Thank you so much for watching my video. Stay tuned for my next video on leprosy. Make sure you subscribe to my channel and follow me on Instagram at Dr. Namra Aziz.